Welcome to the IoT Unicorn Podcast. This is Pete Bernard from Microsoft, and this podcast is for anyone interested in the long-term technology trends in the IoT space and the journey from here to there. So let's get started. On this episode of the IoT Unicorn, we talk to a very interesting person doing very interesting things, and that's Sarah Maston of Microsoft. We talk about Boston University, where we both went to school, a little bit about nutrition technology, but we spend quite a bit of time talking about Project 15, which is an open platform effort that her and her colleagues have been championing. It's an anti-poaching platform that's been adopted by a number of NGOs around the world, and we talk about that and the technology behind it. So please join us. Sarah, thanks for joining us. We've had a lot of different guests on the show, from Silicon Partners to telecom, internal Microsoft. I think you kind of fall into the category of very interesting Microsoft people that are doing very interesting things. So I'm gonna tee that up. Maybe you can give us a little bit of an intro yourself and sort of some background.
Sure. It's funny when I look at my cats, I don't know that they think I'm that interesting, but thank you.
Right.
I'm really happy to be here. Where did I come from? So I actually have a really long history in the database space.
Okay.
I started out, making data warehouses before that was a thing. That kind of grew. And so I started out as a medical programmer, actually, at a company called Meditech in Massachusetts.
We're in Massachusetts, by the way.
They were in Natick, but I lived in Arlington. I went to BU.
Interesting. Oh, you went to BU?
I did.
I went to BU also. I'm a BU grad. Isn't that weird? No, I was going to say, go Terriers. I was going to say my first job out of college was in West Natick. There was a little shop called the Bitbucket Computer Store, and my professor from BU, my assembly language professor, actually ran the company, the Bitbucket, and we built computers. Branded computers, and I was his first engineering hire, and it was in West Natick. I didn't stay there that long because it was kind of like a weird job, but yeah, the Bitbucket. Remember West Natick? Yeah, Natick's a nice area.
So right. Cool. I was going to say, did they have a lot of Twinkies? Because I believe that the Twinkie fact. I don't know. I think it's.
Oh, the Twinkie was there.
Clear. I think
that was it. I know there's Necco wafers too. Is out.
Oh, delicious! I'm not sure where delicious. Yeah. No, I actually have a degree in psychology and women's studies from BU.
Fantastic.
So a little bit.
Go Terriers! Yeah. Okay. There you go.
Back to this.
We should have cleared that up in the preamble before we started recording, but that's okay. Now we know, so that's good.
Okay. Weird. So I did a lot of data warehouses, and I put myself actually in Harvard's night school to kind of get out of data and start learning, more Java-y, getting into more programming stuff, because I had a really weird side hobby then as well, where I had been really sick in my late 20s, and I started studying nutrition, and I ended up creating what was a graph database of food, and I wanted to go and put myself in Harvard because it was easier to learn how to code it than to sort of explain it. And and so that journey led me to I actually invented that over at IBM a couple of years ago. And working at IBM, I met a colleague there that had come to Microsoft. And so, how did you come to Microsoft? And well, I had a friend, and then I met the IoT group, and they. It was funny because I was kind of the first person in the group that hadn't built a computer, to be
right.
Wasn't a hardware person. And, but when they brought me in to start talking about that bigger data conversation. So that's how I got here.
Yeah, cool. So you've been here, I think, a couple of years.
I have
2 years or about that. That's exciting. Yeah, so that's an interesting path. I mean, I think a lot of people get to Microsoft through professional connections, personal connections. There's all sorts of different ways, and so you were involved in nutrition and kind of analyzing that. Is that still a big kind of passion of yours, personal nutrition and things?
Yes, personal. Once I designed the graph with the team there, which was the connection of food to disease through phytochemicals and the reactions in your body, was kind of like a Facebook of food. I had spent so much, honestly, I'd spent so much time on that in my life that the IoT space and starting to learn, more formally about that was so exciting. And, a lot of my data colleagues in my circle, same thing, because sometimes you can be doing the same thing and, database, what's new? And so this was actually really fun. And it was in the beginning of when I got here, my job was a lot of enablement. We were going to teach people how to use Azure and how to use Azure IoT and et cetera. That's my fault that I'm having a notification because clearly I don't know how to turn that off. What's interesting is that it's kind of a strange story in the sense that I was, it's not that strange, but I was outside of my apartment and I saw a lot of smoke and I freaked out and I ran into my building to save my cats. And, long story, very short, lots of stress.
Yeah.
But the next day, I ended up designing a safety platform that could use IoT to, speak differently in a crisis. And so that's really, something that whenever I talk about my journey to Microsoft and learning something new, is that it was so great to have the space to be like, hey, I have an idea. Anyway, that's another story.
Fascinating. Yeah, I do actually. I use I'm kind of a Fitbit fan, and I use the food logging on Fitbit, and it gives me a macronutrient breakdown and stuff. And so I've been kind of on my own health journey the past year or so, and feeling good, feeling fit, and part of it is kind of analyzing what I ingest, and I feel like we're just sort of at the beginning of a lot of that science. Like I would love for the data I'm putting into the Fitbit system, which I guess is now Google, just to get even more analysis of that, over time. So it's fascinating, kind of measuring what you put into your body and how your body is working. And we had a Dr. David Rue from Microsoft's chief medical officer on a few weeks ago, and talking about COVID, of course, but also just more of the intersection of health and technology and very early stages of really taking advantage of that kind of combination. So,
no, that's true. It's my work. It was my work pretty much focused on just taking, stuff we do with process architecture and analysis and then data, of course. But if I think back when my hair was much browner, I just thought, what's breaking when it came to metabolic syndrome, and and it was, what happens when I do this, and then how does what does your intestinal villi do? And so basically, connecting those dots to kind of go through the process architecture of digestion, and then to make, sort of the data model of that. And to say, when you eat oatmeal, that pectin and beta glucan, pectin from apples and pears, comes in, it absorbs bile salts, basically all those different processes, and then how those can combine. And really, back in the day, I created what's called a food program, and that's also known as a diet, but a food program that would layer what foods to eat, how to change your, internals to do what it needed to do. And I guess my own doctor took notice because I lowered my cholesterol 90 points in under 3 months. So,
wow.
And then I made a system that did it. And so, that was really, and I met a lot of really cool people in that journey. Then unfortunately I got sick from stress. But when I came out of that, here I was, and then I invented some new stuff.
Good. So let's talk about some new stuff. You've been sort of very, very busy, not only being a fairly new Microsoft employee, but also building up something that is referred to as Project 15 for probably some of our listeners are probably familiar. But why don't you give us a little bit of a recap of the origin story around Project 15 and where that's at?
Sure. I'd love to. I do a little project although it's a little bigger now, in my spare nights and weekend hours, with a few friends of mine here at Microsoft. And all right, so the origin story, once upon a time, it really speaks back to that incident with the cat. And essentially I made a safety system that could use IoT devices to speak to a community within an emergency. So if you thought about, some of the stuff that was going on, you have to go to Twitter to find a hashtag. You have to go, you don't really know what's going on. There were so many systems getting good data to first responders, but for us, we don't really know what's going on. So that project became known as Project Edison. And so, I went and for about a year, we built that with a partner, Insight, and we went on the IoT in Action global event tour and talked about it. And I talked about safety in every context you could imagine. I talked about safe retail. I talked about safe cities. I talked about safe schools, safe workplaces, safe buildings. And then actually, I met a guy who does anti-poaching, and his name was Eric, and Eric Dinnerstein. And I realized, in one of these very stereotypical, I was at the cafe with my colleague Daisuke, and I started drawing, and I said, anti-poaching, it's the same use case as a Project Edison safety case. And he looked at me and I said, well, it's a population that can't defend itself, and it's someone that you want to stop or make it less impactful using devices, and then people you need to talk to get help. So maybe we can, get other people that were like us to have this aha moment that, scientists are remaking these wheels that we've already made in the commercial space. Right. And so that's how Project 15 started, which was like, what do we have in our world that we just don't know the use cases in the scientific world? And the second person I met was another professor, Wasser, Dr. Sam Wasser, and he was at UW. And he also was involved with trying to prevent, animal the tracking of tusks and things, illegal trafficking. And I learned about a pangolin from one of his research fellows, which is a tiny, cute, little, scaly animal. And I'd never heard of a pangolin. So cute. And they're slow. And the problem is that their defense mechanism is that if you scare them, they turn into a ball. And
Sounds
if you
fair.
Right. I do the same thing. I
can relate to that.
I'm just going to be a little ball over here. And that works for lions, and tigers who are like, ooh, that's a sharp little ball. But it doesn't work for, poachers will just make a noise. It curls up into a ball. They pick it up. They put it in a bag.
Yeah.
So
I see.
That is actually that's our most poached animal on the planet, actually. So anyway, but I thought, well, what's the difference between shoplifting a sweater, at a store and shoplifting an animal?
Yeah.
And so that was really where this started, was, can we just think about this?
Right. Fantastic. And I think, and I did see you had a segment on a recent video. It was like a United Nations kind of kind of gathering of interested parties around the Equator Initiative. I guess I was labeled on YouTube, but can you talk a little bit about that? I mean, you're getting some pretty good NGO type of engagement, I think, right off of Project 15.
Yes. So that was super exciting. I'll just like full disclosure, I was very nervous. But and I was a little frustrated with the pandemic, because I think I could have gone to the United Nations in another reality. I know. But virtually was very fun. And so what happened so we put up a video, because we had support from my CVP and my management tree, and pretty much everyone in the group that I was in was very supportive of Project 15 right in the beginning. Right. And so we put up a little web page, and I mean, I used to call it the bat phone, because we wondered if anyone would call from the scientific realm, and we actually started meeting NGOs. Like, we had people used our webpage to get in touch with us, and two of the people, one of them is that we started working with, is the Red Panda Network, which is a fascinating and wonderful organization. Another one is called the Zambezi Project, and the third was a woman who runs the Small Grants Program. At the United Nations Development Program, has different sections, and Small Grants is a department that funds scientific projects, and that are all very, very much sustainability focused. I could give a whole talk about. They're so fascinating. And I met her because she actually knew. Her husband was friends with Daisuke. So it was like one of these things where somebody hears about what's, and hey, that's really interesting. Let's see if that would work. And so we, and then 6 months later, I'm speaking at their conference. But what happened is that we kind of paired up together to see if we could bring our commercial processes that we do normally with my day job, IoT engagements. We're going to do an architectural design session. We're going to, get to know those processes. And then she gave us, we piloted with 3 grantees and started to try to figure out we have different worlds but we use this, we do the same things. It's just different words to describe them.
Sure.
And so, that's, we had a few epiphanies during this process. And so the thing is that her group funds thousands of NGO companies and projects, scientists that range from urban sustainability, so like smart city type stuff, all the way to biodiversity, which is where we kind of focused. And so how do you scale? And so we've been working with her and her group on scaling up and digitally transforming this area, through not only Azure IoT, but how does that work with, the research part? There's a lot of machine learning. There's a lot of, comms. So, connecting that into something like Teams, so it's bigger than Azure IoT specifically, all IoT solutions are. And so, exactly. So that's, so that I got invited to speak.
It's interesting. Who do we have on recently? Oh, we were talking to Corey Clark from RXR, and he was talking about the smart building solutions that they're rolling out for office space and, office space post-COVID, and how do you use AI and sensors to detect, occupancy and distance from each other, and a lot of the core tech around sort of using AI vision and other things and processing that data. It's all very similar, like the core tech is similar, right? But now we have all these other ways of sort of applying it, whether it's in healthcare or biodiversity or whatever. And so that's kind of an exciting thing about Microsoft, is a lot of the platform tech that we're doing here kind of gets used in all these different directions, right? And so you've sort of found a particular sort of slice where obviously there's a super high need, and folks should look up and learn more about the poaching problems that are happening in the world, but it's pretty significant. And to take some of the tech that has been used for more of the, traditional digital transformation that we talk about, but actually using that tech in a really smart way out in the field and like the real world to help a problem. I mean, it must be pretty satisfying for you as a Microsoft employee. And I guess one of my questions is, that must take up a pretty good chunk of your time, as it should. And so you're doing that, and you're also working at Microsoft. And so, like, how do you end up balancing all these things? Like, is this, give us a little more insight. How do you do that?
I have a supportive wife who feeds me and makes sure that I eat. And, so good question. So when we started to, scale, and I clearly, Daisuke and I cannot meet with every NGO to do an AD, et cetera.
Yeah.
So COVID, in the beginning of this, we did have a very big partnering model. And so, we have all these great IoT partners. They've got platforms, and just connect these projects to them like we would a startup, a retail startup or something.
Sure.
Unfortunately, the pandemic happened. And of course, as we know, it's all hands on deck to start landing like you just mentioned, the return to work and employee safe. So Daisuke and I kind of, had another coffee talk, though virtual. And I said, you know what? Why don't we use the company hackathon and make an 80% solution for these folks? That's an easier way. And so we actually got reached out to by a couple of colleagues. One of them was Pamela Cortez and Anders in my group. And they both said, we'd love to join this because we know what you're doing, and we need to figure out how to do the sort of the least amount of stuff to have a big impact. And to do that, we need to rely on existing enablement motions and, partnerships within other groups. And if we could just build that, then we can roll that out. And off it goes, just like anything else.
Yeah. Well, and, Microsoft has a great partner network too. So that's the good thing. We have developers, we have channel partners, we have solution providers, this huge kind of force multiplying engine. It's one of the cool things also about Microsoft is just to get that great idea out there, partners picking it up and amplifying it and kind of landing it locally. So it was good that you took advantage of it. I do want to make sure people know the aka.ms/project 15, is that sort of the go-to place to get the latest?
That is the place. Awesome. And then if it can, down at the bottom there, we have a new link on that page that brings you to the open platform. If you want to check that out.
So let me ask you too. So another question, you mentioned COVID-19 and obviously we're all sort of, working through that in so many ways. And how has that affected sort of some of your efforts around Project 15 in terms of, has it been some acceleration in the adoption of technology? Has it slowed down some of these NGOs? I mean, has it?
So, I mean, this is a multifaceted answer. So let me think about my words. Okay. So what happened, because now in the past year, in my private time and just learning and meeting new people and learning about this space, because I didn't know anything. So if you're somebody who's like me, who always wanted to help but didn't think you could, so you just kind of watched, like, that is not true. All of our skills are welcome and wanted. And a lot of these organizations are nonprofits. So, and there's a lot of tech developer groups that you can kind of code for good and get involved in on the device level and the software side. So I just wanted to put that out there. But what happened is that the places where these things are happening, you'll read news articles that poaching accelerated, or the lack of tourism has caused some problems. So this space seems to be having the same problems that every other part of the world is having when it comes to learning to adapt to a pandemic world. We weren't exactly affected in terms of getting on the phone at 7:00 at night, Pacific time, to meet with Sanam, who runs the Red Panda Network, who's in Nepal, because we were always virtual, and and actually, the lack of social life being quarantined probably helped myself and Daisuke and Pamela and Anders when we were cranking out, the code and the plan for scale. And so the answer is no. I mean, one thing that's it's a little bit challenging is that I was used to meeting up with our partner architect friends, and we would draw on pieces of paper, and we'd talk about smart factories, and then we'd talk about this, and so those kind of conversations got harder. But I did get involved with a hackathon that came out of Hackster and Avnet, where they were hacking on the Open Collar project to build the smartest elephant. That's the goal, is to build the smartest elephant collar for smart parks. So I just wanted to mention that is the partner ecosystem is out there. They're doing stuff in this area as well as all the areas. But so I don't think it stopped. It's just at least not for us sitting at a desk.
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, I think you've I've definitely missed some of the more serendipitous conversations I've had. Sometimes you kind of, that's where you have the serendipitous meetings and conversations that sort of connect things. And it's been a little more planful maybe in terms of conversations and time. But I know also that there's been a lot of tech acceleration by a lot of companies too. The whole notion of remote and, leveraging the cloud a lot more. So hopefully that does, work in your favor. I was going to mention we haven't talked about the tech behind Project 15 too much. You mentioned AI is obviously like big data sets. I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I think this sounds like a really exciting potential for 5G/LPWA tech in some form. I know that I don't think they've rolled out 5G yet in Nepal, but the idea of some sort of, low frequency or low spectrum cellular connections that can blanket those areas, exciting. So that's a follow on for me. I will actually take that as an action to circle back and see what we can do to help there.
That's actually one of the when it comes to the spectrum of, silicon to cloud, I fall squarely into process architecture and designing, how you're going to get this to there and what are we going to do and strategy on that. I also fall squarely on data because of my background. When it comes to connectivity, Pamela and Daisuke on the Project 15 meta team, they're really interested in that. But something I noticed is that my assumption is that someplace like the Himalayas wouldn't have any connectivity or something. Like that was just my own, I don't know if that's a preconception or just like that's the woods in the mountains. However, when we looked into it and we've been working with some groups in the Caribbean as well that go out like into the ocean, it's all got coverage. It may be 2G. There's always a satellite, which then you're going to bring in some edge. Let's compute as much as possible over here at the camera or the gateway. But that was really surprising. So like, I'm interested in we'll loop back on your thoughts.
We'll have to loop back. there's like some really interesting things happening, especially if you want to have, you're designing for very low bandwidth networks, like low cost, low bandwidth networks. You actually need to do more processing on the edge. And then, it's more of a metadata that's going to the cloud as opposed to the actual streams of video or camera images, right? So some really fascinating things going on there that I think would be really exciting, not only to land in kind of low bandwidth networks, but also that also enables some very low power endpoints, right? So you imagine you want to stick some sensors onto a tree out there somewhere, or if you want it solar powered, right, you need to kind of keep that power profile really low. So like projects like these, I mean, not only are they inherently just good, but they are also pushing the tech, maybe more so than the more business oriented deployments that we have, that maybe are a little quote unquote easier. These are hard deployments because of some of the different, environmental factors. So it's always exciting to see the tech being pushed in that direction.
I was going to say, just to jump in, you actually raise this is a really big deal. So, I mean, there's what we're doing with Project 15, but there's the bigger Microsoft sustainability mission. And so this year, if you go out to the Microsoft sustainability webpage, we just made a recent announcement about water. There was a really interesting announcement about the circular economy and waste. And so when you start to think about devices, so let's say you come from the more device side of the spectrum of our solutioning, I met a scientist who said something really that stuck with me. We're trying to save the oceans from plastic using plastic. And so when you start to think about how we make devices, how do we make better batteries? How do we use, like you said, that's solar. When kind of it's like, I mean, we also, I think as a technical community should be thinking about that, because it really wasn't purview a year ago, but okay, that makes a lot of sense. I never really thought about that.
No, it's fascinating. I was going to ask you, by the way, before I think I don't know where we're at on time here. I'll have to check my clock, but I know we're not traveling anymore, but I still stay in touch with BU through their various alumni programs and things. Do you stay in touch with any sort of BU alums or any Boston related things these days?
I do,
because we're pretty far from Boston. People don't know we're actually like in Redmond, Washington. It's kind of like the polar opposite of Boston. So
3,000 miles away. I do. I mean, I have friends that I went there with, and I get the magazine, and I get.
The magazine.
I was very proud of what was it? One of the alums. She was in the Orange is the New Black, and I was like, "Whoa, BU!" So, and then of course on LinkedIn, I see different things. Actually, speaking of COVID, I saw a really cool video that I thought was very, edgy. And he did a video about everybody wearing their masks, and I was like, yes, But I keep an eye an eye on what's going on there.
Good.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating to see all this stuff, how it's evolving, and how we're all sort of connected, right? So now you and I are connected through Boston University. I didn't even know that. So
who knew? T. Anthony's Pizza.
Who knew? T. Anthony's. Yeah, I love that place. Yeah. Although I don't eat cheese anymore, but I still love pizza. Well. So cool. So any final thoughts, Sarah? We kind of said the URL people should go to. What's the call to action here? What do you want people to go do now that they've been sort of educated here?
When you think about it, if you go out and you get to the Project 15 open platform, for those of us who are very familiar, when you see the architecture, you'll say, oh, this looks like everything else that is the components of an IoT solution. That is true. So I've actually been using it with, met some startups, and I said, well, hey, doing my usual day job, which is how do I learn Azure IoT, and go here. ask me questions if you have them. So, I mean, people who are on the coding side of our world, feel free to bug bash that. And, you know, any feedback is absolutely welcome. It's really a passion project when you get down to it, which we hope is really useful. And if you do have people who are, you know, technical on the scientific side, and it's interesting to them, and you know, we are building it through Pamela's work with community, so that people will be able to get enabled on it. This speaks to the how do you do all of this? Well, I have smart friends, and so so that really it's out there for you to use. Any feedback is welcome. And we hope it helps.
Yeah, I encourage people to go to that website and learn more about it. And Sarah, really appreciate the time today. You know, I know you're really busy, so carving out a little time here, much appreciated. So hopefully we can actually meet each other in person at some point in the near future. So that'd be great. Soon.
Wear your masks, everybody. Exactly. All right. Yeah, no, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Sure. Okay, cool. All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
All right. This is Pete Bernard. You've been listening to the IoT Unicorn Podcast, and thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for the next episode, and feel free to give us some feedback at the IoT Unicorn at Microsoft.com. Thank you.